inside the Borg and free from the hive mind, this is Rex Bear hosting Leak Project. The Leak Project was created to offer awareness and information not found in the mainstream news. With over 90% of the world's media controlled by only 6 enormous conglomerates, many people today are looking for more accurate information. The Leak Project offers a refreshing approach to the brain-drained media. Check back daily for new content as we thrive to bring you the cutting edge in news, current events, on-scene video footage, interviews, and most importantly, the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got an awesome guest tonight, Freeman, host of FreemanTV.com, an excellent website. He's been on the forefront of conspiracy theories for almost 2 decades. Freeman also created the first documentary on HAARP, televised the first documentary on chemtrails, which I see all the time. He's been honored by the Mayan shamans and blessed by the king of Bonglong. I don't know if I said that properly, so I probably didn't. But while enlightening the world on the occult aspects of Hollywood technology, politics with his TV show, The Freeman Perspective, etc., this is going to be just a fantastic show. Really appreciate you coming on with us tonight, Freeman. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing all right, and looking forward to this.
Oh, this is fantastic. Certainly a blessing to have you on the show. As I told you earlier before we got started, I've been following your work now for several years. You've got a great YouTube channel, and when I watched Aliens from Hell, the presentation that you did a couple years ago with a lot of stuff that's happening now that you talked about previously, man, it sure is incredible. And talk about synchronicities. I recently watched a 3-part series on Sci-Fi Channel called Childhood's End, and it has this extraterrestrial race that basically comes down and enslaves the human race in a kind manner, I guess, kind of like bringing cattle to the slaughter in a peaceful way, not to where they know they're going to get killed. And then I watched that video, so just certainly some synchronicities. But if we could, for our listeners that maybe haven't heard your background, just give us a quick bio on who you are and what you do and how you do it.
Well, I have been a wanderer, a shaman, a truther for a long time. I've wandered this earth. I gave up on the real world when I realized that there was these high-profile rituals going on that involved politics and celebrities. And, you know, as I looked at the world around 1999 and they were about to perform their capping of the Great Pyramid with gold for Y2K, and they did all their Luciferian rituals in the Y2K celebrations, I said, this is it. I'm off. I'm off of this. But you know, I've been doing this for a long time. My first interview actually was 1993, I think. And, you know, I've been everywhere, done everything that I can to get an insight on what's going on with the occult, with secret societies, mind control, and now the new high technologies. So I ended up on Austin Access, sitting in the same chair as Alex Jones, not at the same time, but his show was on Access right before mine. And this is pre-YouTube, pre-Google video, before anything. You had to be on television. And that television show, The Freeman Perspective, laid out pretty much everything I knew as far as I could, and then went even deeper than that. I've interviewed a number of magicians just to try and understand this realm, this world. I have an entire esoteric library that I dig deep and I find knowledge that people don't generally share because they don't read the data, right? Yeah. So most of what I tell you can't be found on the internet. Until Freeman TV came along, this stuff wasn't known. And, you know, so many of the magicians that I've interviewed have actually died, almost all of them now. It's pretty crazy. But so I did the Freeman Perspective for a number of years for the television show. And then that broke down into when podcasting started. I started a podcast, and now I have the Free Zone, a live weekly show every Saturday. Well, pseudo live. But it airs every Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's a great time. It's really an amazing time to be alive, to be able to tweak with all this technology.
Yeah, and it seems like because everybody's connected around the world in some way, it's a lot easier to get access to information and pictures and on-scene footage, etc. So your website, as well as your YouTube channel, Freeman Fly, got some great videos on there. As I was talking earlier at the beginning of the show, when I had a chance to watch that first video, Aliens from Hell, it was just, you brought up a lot of connections on symbology and the number 666, the mark of the beast, Hollywood media, MTV, music, etc., Aleister Crowley. And I find it fascinating that you have had the opportunity to speak with many magicians. We had Lon Milo Duquette on here a while back, and Andrea Vitamus, and he is a practitioner, I would say, of the left-hand path. And certainly you know a lot about Aleister Crowley and how he has influenced the world today. So I was hoping you could talk to us a bit about what you call the satanification of America.
Yeah, what a mind blower.
It sure is.
Because, if it was overt Satanism that I was seeing, then I don't know, I'd have an easier time handling it, thinking it was maybe show, it was programming, it was, training the children into a satanic belief system. But the thing of it is that the satanic symbols that I'm seeing are so covert that only one that studies deeply into the occult would even realize that these were satanic symbols. Now, one example of that would be the Monster Drink logo. Now, as I started to dig deep into the occult, and what really triggered me was to find out that my father was a high-level Freemason that was chasing flying saucers for the government. So
how cool is that?
Yeah, right. And all my life, he never said a thing about it. I had to discover it for myself. And when I was in college, I learned about Freemasonry, and I was shocked that most of the world has no idea of their influence. And then I'm also shocked at how many people have a trigger reaction to the idea of these ritual magic performers running countries, because after I put out corporate logos, and to give an example of this, so I put together the first film on occult corporate logos and what they mean. And I could easily decipher every major corporate logo inside of a Masonic ritual. And so if you understand what the Masonic rituals are, what they do inside of the lodge when they raise themselves and go through these rituals, then you can correlate that with corporate logos. Now, that's something different. To me, those are signs of allegiance. I won't get into listing those right away, but these satanic symbols that I'm seeing, these are shockers, because like the Monster Drink logo is a Hebrew letter V, and the Hebrew letter V is 6. Their letters are numbers, and V is 6. So VVV on the Monster Drink logo, you can't tell, but that's what a Hebrew V basically looks like. So it was very clear to me. Now, what I find very intriguing is I put this information out to the world. I put it in many lectures going back about a decade. Before Monster Drink was even out, I was talking about this VVV symbolism in coordination with W being forced into office, and in connection to VW's logo. So when I saw the Monster Drink logo come out, it was immediately 666 to me, because I study Hebrew. Now, the reason is that once you start to study Freemasonry, you learn very quickly that Freemasonry is based on Kabbalah. And Kabbalah is an ancient Hebrew mysticism. And so everything that you transliterate from their signs and symbols has to also relate into Hebrew. But the one that really struck me, and this was one that we picked up that you're going to like more, as we started to study the Typhonian order of the Ordo Templi Orientis. Okay, so people have heard of Aleister Crowley, many. But he came in and joined a magical order known as the Golden Dawn. He revamped that order a bit, but did not stay with it. He moved on to the Ordo Templi Orientis, which is known as the Order of the Eastern Templar, and revamped all of that as well. And inside of this order is another order that's known as the Typhonian Order of the OTO. And these guys, their whole goal, and you can read all their books on it, on the Typhonian Trilogy by Kenneth Grant, their goal is communication with interdimensional or extraterrestrial beings utilizing ritual magic. Now, what was really shocking, and I'll just make this point and then we can move on, is that they outline and define what the mark of the beast is. So now we have so many people out there that hold this Christian system, belief system, that also came from Crowley's family, actually, because he was with Plymouth Brethren. His family was a hard, fundamental Christian. The Plymouth Brethren were very strict, and it was them that came up with the concept of the rapture, and a lot of the things that started to gel in ideas like Left Behind actually come from the group that Crowley was raised in. But in a Christian paradigm, the mark of the beast, you can't buy or sell. Obviously, it's a microchip. Now, I hate it when people say obviously, because it's not obvious, and you're applying 21st century technology to something, that you're just making an assumption there. But the OTO, the Typhonian Order especially, but also inside the OTO, they have a very definitive symbol that is the mark of the beast. So, folks, the mark of the beast is an O and an X. It is the X-Men logo.
So speaking of X-Men, sorry, just that made me think that brand new X-Men movie that's coming out, the original mutant, and he's the bad guy. His name is Yahweh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go figure, right? Of course. That's when you get into Gnosticism and learn how Yahweh is the evil demiurge that created the material realm, and we actually all live in hell.
Right. The Archon theory.
Mm-hmm. This goes back to Madame Blavatsky, who also related into Crowley's work. She was not much earlier, but a bit earlier than Crowley. So Crowley came out with the Book of the Law about 1904, around 1904, and Theosophy, Madame Blavatsky was publishing in the 1880s. And yeah, that whole concept was actually adopted by the Nazis, and that's why they believe in the Aryan race, which is actually a Middle Eastern race, as the superior beings. He would actually carry around the works of Theosophy, and Adolf Hitler would, and this really boiled into a lot of the Nazi belief system. But see, this mark of the beast, this O and X, this was such a shocker to me. And I posted it on the website, tried to make this knowledge known because it started showing up all over the place. It was Macintosh's new operating system. It's the symbol for, just so many things at this time. I can't think of them all.
Movies too, right?
Well,
like a Triple X with Vin Diesel.
Well, no, we're looking at the X-Men logo. So a key ingredient, a key example here was when Madonna came out at the Super Bowl, and she did what she called a 33-minute sermon at the Super Bowl during the halftime. Now, anyone that was a fan of my show or my research knew immediately that she was broadcasting the mark of the beast all over that show. She came out as the Whore of Babylon, dressed in this Celtic type goddess wear, right?
Right.
But on the stage, numerous times they showed the mark of the beast, the O and the X, and even crossed it with the W. And the W is another sign that goes to this, that is a symbol of the abyss and where the beast lives. So it was the mark of the beast along with the sign of the beast, along with the number of the beast, all being broadcast to everyone without them having a single clue that this was going on. And that's why I find it so intriguing, is because it's not blatant Satanism. It's very covert Satanism.
Well, it's covert, and for those like yourself and myself and people that have had an opportunity to follow your work, etc., it's very obvious because these symbols that they push in front of the masses, go all the way back to the Egyptian times that you speak about in many of your lectures. So it seems as if there's this power that they obtain by putting it in movies and songs and etc. With the research that you've done, does it seem to be that they're almost as if it's like a ritual that does create some power for them that they can harness in some way?
That has been my biggest question, and that is why I go straight to the source and ask Satanists and ask magicians, trying to get an understanding of why this is all going on like that. And yeah, absolutely, I do feel that this is much like the times of Greece, where the actors are portraying the gods and actually embodying the gods. Now, there's only really two factors to ritual magic, and that is invocation and evocation. So that is, you're either drawing an entity into your soul or you're projecting an entity into somebody else or a mass of people. Now, curiously enough, if you open any magical book, let's say Modern Magic or the ceremonies of the Golden Dawn, you
Sure.
open up any magic book and look at the triangle of manifestation, and that is a hand position that forms a triangle, and that is the signal to send an incarnated being into whatever is facing the triangle. So how many of these celebrities that people say, oh, look, they're doing the Illuminati eye? No, 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 you're missing the point here. And that's one of the biggest problems with I've seen as my work has expanded to become quote unquote common knowledge, is that people don't study the actual magical practices. So they just, oh, it's Illuminati, which means nothing. But if you study the magic, then no, that is the triangle of manifestation they're holding in front of their eye. And that is meant to incarnate a being into your soul. That you can read that in any magic book you want.
Right.
Accomplish.
Right. Now, you say you've read some different books and had an opportunity to interview many magicians or magi, I guess they call themselves. Have you talked to people that practice different forms of magic?
Yeah, I think they all had their own different flavor. The last one to die was Paul Laffoley, and he was a Kabbalistic magician that designed time machines. He was kicked out of Harvard for conceptual deviance, and as you will see in the interview I had with him, he was also the Twin Tower architect that had the Bin Ladens come and ask him where to place the demolition charges.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you had the opportunity to speak with him. And did he design that with a thought in mind of it was eventually going to be taken out and create some type of magical ritual? Because a lot of people think that they were taken out to create some type of new age, kind of like what Aleister Crowley talked about, the age of Horus.
I did ask him that directly, and he denied that Yamasaki had any magical intentions. He said that the buildings were designed to represent the Rockefeller brothers, and this was why one building was 6 feet taller than the other. He swore up and down that Yamasaki was way too much of a straight arrow. But when you watch the completion of the One World Tower, then you see that it has a cube at the base and then a spiral going up out of that. And this cube plays into this over and over and over and over again. So I do believe there is magical intention in the creation of these buildings.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk about that before, Freeman. Different buildings like the Pentagon and other, I guess you could say, government funded, federally funded buildings that harness some type of entity or energy and what some might call a demonic force. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, much like Ghostbusters or the Shakespeare episode of Doctor Who. The building's designed to actually channel these entities into it. which really made a big splash on Ghostbusters. But one that you can go and research for yourself, find out that this was truly the intention of building a building in New York. There's a building known as the Master Building, and this was built for a character known as Nicholas Roerich. Now, most people have not heard the name Nicholas Roerich, but he is worshipped by so many of the occultists, especially Manly P. Hall has statues of him everywhere. And Nicholas Roerich was actually working with, am I going to forget his name? Secretary of Agriculture uh, for the government, being sent to Tibet, being sent to these subterranean chambers to perform different rituals, carrying this mysterious box that is rumored to have a piece of Sirius in it. So I don't know how that works, but what Nicholas Roerich has done has painted himself in all of these places, doing these rituals with ancient Tibetans in subterranean chambers with massive crystals. And he has all the paintings there are in my photography section on my website, because I go to all these places and I research them all. I've been to every Mason temple nearly on the globe. I mean, I've been to Australia, London, America, and I've visited at least 50, 60 different Mason temples, including the Supreme Council of the 33rd and the original very first Masonic temple in London. I've investigated, photographed, and researched every one of these. But Nicholas Roerich, they built a building for him downtown called the Master Building. It's currently an apartment building now. And upstairs, the meditation chamber is designed in these focal points to bring these entities. And the building was built intentionally for that purpose. This is something that you can go research for yourself to know that this is on their minds. I wish I could remember the name of the president or Secretary of Agriculture that he was working with. It starts with a W, and I don't know why my brain's drawing a blank.
Hey, no worries. Maybe HARP got to you, so they know this program's going on right now, so they're sending a signal from Alaska. It's interesting. A few years ago, I was going to Alaska, and I kind of made a joke about it over the phone that I was going to go check out HARP with a friend of mine. And we noticed some very weird stuff happening to my phone after that, to my friends that would call me up. It would get this weird clicking sound, and it would call, and somebody would pick up, but my phone wouldn't ring.
Oh, yeah. Back in the 90s, we always messed around with Echelon. My friends used to call me and go, bomb, 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 terrorist, terrorist, terrorist. We used to play games with this. I mean, we knew about Echelon, in the early 90s, maybe late 80s. The listening system that is set up in Australia that is NSA.
Sure.
And sure, yeah, you better believe that thing is tapping everything. I wonder how smart that thing has become.
Well, it might even have some artificial intelligence connected to obviously all those supercomputers that they have that just must be mind-boggling. But you talk about, in one of your lectures, you talked about Lamb, the entity that Aleister Crowley had spoken with and summoned or invoked, or I guess you could say invoked. And there's the Thule Society, the writer of Star Trek that was a part of Thule Society claims to have gotten some of that information from those seances that the Nazis did. And I was wondering if you could tell us about that and some of the connections and the information that you have.
Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, actually was good friends with L. Ron Hubbard. Now, if you don't know this, L. Ron Hubbard founded Scientology, science fiction writer who then started a religion. Of course, Roddenberry was very jealous of this and wanted to start a religion himself, but never really had the knack like Hubbard did. Now, L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons of Jet Propulsion's Laboratories, which founded modern rocketry with the help of the Nazi scientists, such as Werner von Braun, they formed what became NASA. So NASA and Jet Propulsion's Laboratories were founded by these Well, I use the term Satanist because they tend to use that term themselves. But they are absolutely performing ritual magic to the secret or hidden god, Pan. And this is, of course, where you kind of get that goat-headed devil sort of situation with Baphomet, the idea of Pan. If you read Crowley and the Hidden God, same Typhonian trilogy, you'll learn of Pan and how this is the hidden god. So Jack Parsons, when he would launch rockets or nukes, uh, they would do rituals to Pan during these launches. So Roddenberry was also a good friend of in this situation, and also a somewhat practicing magician. It really takes serious dedication to be a magician. This is not a flight of fancy sort of situation. You got to learn a lot. So Roddenberry, he's kind of a goof, but so he did sit in on channelings with some of the larger corporate families of America and maybe even the world. I know the Astors were involved, and some other lead families, and would meet in like a barn and channel these entities that they called the Nine, and they would get these messages from them. Now, the channeler that they used was the Israeli psychic known as Uri Geller. And Uri gets so interesting. Now, if you remember Uri Geller, he was the one that would bend the keys with his mind. He was all over television. Well, he was the channel that they were using for this, and he eventually quit. I guess talking to the Nine was somewhat taxing, and he eventually said that the Nine were not actually the 9 Egyptian gods known as the Ennead of ancient Egypt, but were actually a AI technology orbiting the planet known as Spectre, which, really shocks me. When the new HP computers came out, they were known as Omen, Envy, and Spectre. And of course, then also the new Bond, always spelt the same way with the RE instead of ER. Now, Omen, Envy, and Spectre, that's what you're going to name your new computers. I mean, come on, guys. We got bitten apples on there. We've got satanic symbols galore on these computers. And now Uri Geller is telling us that the channel that they were making contact with was actually an AI technology orbiting the planet. Now, Uri Geller, if I could just go on a minute longer, then branches off and starts seeking immortality. And he joins up with the mighty forces of Michael Jackson. And all of a sudden now, this Israeli psychic and Michael Jackson are running around seeking a robotic body to transmit their soul into. And the robot that they had picked was known as E-Rock. And this was way early in the day, and these robots, super low budget. You can see E-Rock in a movie called Home Movie, and I think you can even find it on YouTube. But so this guy was hired by Michael Jackson to build a robot for him to transmit his soul into. But of course, then technology progressed, and human cloning became more of a factor. And in the year 2000, the corporation known as CloneAid came forth in front of Congress and announced that they've been cloning humans for some time. Now, they had a very intriguing character backing them, and he was known as Ra-El. Now, Ra means Lord in Egypt, and El means Lord in Hebrew. And he had a symbol given to him by Yahweh, who met him in a flying saucer. And it was the Star of David interwoven with a swastika. And he was to build an embassy for the Elohim's return, very much like childhood end. Right? He's building this embassy for the extraterrestrial gods to return. They contacted him in the Pyrenees Mountains in France and gave him this commission. Now, strangely enough, I'll just throw in a little personal anecdote with this. Paul Laffoley, who we were talking about before, said that necklace that Ra-El wore, okay, picture this. We're in Congress. We're having a discussion of human cloning. We have the major players of human cloning in the room. This is Bridget Bousselet and Dr. Savros, both claiming to have cloned humans already. And and then this character Ra-El in his big white puffy spacesuit with a Star of David and swastika around his neck. They're interwoven as one thing. Now, Paul Laffoley, this Kabbalistic twin tower architect, said that Ra-El stole that necklace from him. And I swear to you, I'm the only one, as far as I know, that he's told this story to. I've never heard anyone else tell it. But he claims that he was in France, that Claude Virillion, who was to later become Ra-El, found him at a cafe. And actually, Paul had been given this necklace from his gardener, who had received it from an extraterrestrial contact on Mount Vesuvius. All right, I sit here and I listen to these people. I talk with these people, and they are serious when they're telling me these things. So Ra-El actually stole that necklace off of Paul Laffoley and ran with it. And I have a video of him telling this whole story. Okay, so now you've got this guy in a big white puffy spacesuit and this Star of David stolen from Paul Laffoley that was given from extraterrestrials on Mount Vesuvius, or it came from Yahweh in a flying saucer in Pyrenees Mountains, don't know. And he's there before Congress saying, of course human cloning will happen. It's going to carry on because thankfully nothing can stop science. Of course, I have all these videos on my website for you to see. This is Congress, all right? So Michael Jackson and Uri Geller, to get back to the story, meet up with Ra-El and Clonaid, and they hire them to build them a clone so that they could then transfer their bodies into a clone. You don't believe me? Go to Clonaid's website right now, and you will see them boasting about the fact that they have Michael Jackson's DNA and they plan on cloning him. If you think that's absurd, then research the dentist that bought John Lennon's tooth and is planning on cloning him. So the whole story boils down, though. Michael Jackson goes to the mall, a very rich mall in Beverly Hills, and he buys a lifelike replica of King Tut's golden sarcophagus. And the documentarian following him asks him, well, are you going to be buried in this? And Michael says, no, I'm going to live forever. Well, lo and behold, after he buys multi-millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of stuff in this store, including the King Tut replica sarcophagus, he vanishes, right? He announces his 30-day show at the O2 Arena. And if you look at who that person that announces the Michael Jackson concert, it's supposed to be Michael, look very closely. That is not Michael Jackson that's making that announcement. It's an imposter. And then Michael suddenly dies. Well, lo and behold, a month after Michael Jackson dies, everyone in the Chicago area suddenly notices a bust of Michael Jackson in the Chicago Museum from the period of Akhenaten, from the 18th dynasty of Egypt. The very Akhenaten is King Tut's dad. All right. So Michael Jackson buys King Tut's sarcophagus, vanishes. Now a bust of Michael Jackson is in the museum. It's him. Exactly. It's marked as a woman from an unknown female from the age of Akhenaten or King Tut. And no one ever noticed it until Michael vanished. Now, one last curious piece to this puzzle. I interviewed the head of the Time Travel Institute, and he said that yes, time travel is occurring, but we control it. We have time control technologies where we can shut them down, but we can't seem to stop them in Saudi Arabia. Now, the mystery is that when Michael Jackson, quote unquote, died, he was deeply in debt to a Saudi Arabian prince, and no one could figure out why. How bizarre is that story? So yes, Gene Roddenberry was channeling these very entities, and this is the ideas and everything that come from that. And Roddenberry really hoped that he could be like Hubbard and eventually form his own occult religion. And speaking of that, when you speak, L. Ron Hubbard Jr., who was one of the surviving abortions of L. Ron Hubbard, there were many of them, he did an entire article in Penthouse magazine saying how Scientology is actually a satanic ritual just spread out over a long period of time. You can go read this in Penthouse for yourself. It was in the 70s, I think, that he wrote this, but L. Ron Hubbard Jr., that's his description of it. So that's how this all ties up.
Right. And as far as Lamb, the Aleister Crowley and Parsons and Hubbard, I think they all had some connections. And then there was the Scarlet Woman, the Whore of Babylon. What information could you give us on Lamb? Do you think that that's an actual gray or some type of interstellar entity?
Okay, Crowley made a lot of enemies, and Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were two of them. And there was a magical war going on with them. And it's believed that even that Crowley had cursed L. Ron, and that was what brought down his ship in a massive storm. They had this near catastrophe. So this is the type of magical war that they would have, controlling entities or energies. And to give you an idea of their mindset, so L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons at war with Aleister Crowley. Now, yeah, when you look at that depiction of Lamb, let me mention that Crowley died. Okay, so we already know that they're using their ritual magic to channel extraterrestrials. They say this themselves. Read it for yourself. They just republished the Typhonian trilogy. You can get it for yourself, learn about the mark of the beast, learn about this intercommunication with extraterrestrials, and that is the point of their ritual magic. Now, ritual magic has many points. This is just theirs, right? So, yeah, you tie all that together, and you find that Crowley depicts this character of Lam that is, what we consider a gray today. And this was long before anything had ever, long before the concept of the gray was out there. And strangely enough, Crowley had performed a number of these rituals to open these portals, doing most of this at the Loch Ness house, where Jimmy Page eventually moved in, because Jimmy Page was a huge follower of Crowley. And he never closed any of these ritual portals. And so next thing you know, Crowley dies in 1947. 3 months or 2 months later, Roswell. All right. So yeah.
Now, I'm glad you brought up Roswell. That's the next question I was going to ask you. If you thought there might be some connection there, the rituals that they performed might have tapped into some different dimension, and this phenomenon that we saw back then and now might have something to do with it.
Yeah, exactly the point. Exactly. That could very well be why these flying saucers became so prolific at that time. You had the 1952 flap as well, where there were fleets of flying saucers flying over the White House, made front page news. And of course, in today's age, my God, we have so many UFOs. It's crazy. And I put a whole bunch of the best ones in my Obama video, because it's just astounding what we're seeing today.
It is. And do you think that they've had connections with our military for a long time? I mean, let's even go back to the Egyptian times. Do you feel that there's been some influence based upon ETs, that behind the scenes they've kind of controlled the whole thing like it's all a stage?
Well, realize this. The only reason my father was chasing flying saucers for the government was because he was a sworn brother to the Freemasonic order. The only people that go into space and don't die are Freemasons. All right. Buzz Aldrin established a Freemason lodge, Tranquility Lodge, on the moon. That is very much Freemasonry, and the occult are very much wrapped up in this whole space program. So there's no escaping that. If anyone's looking at national history or the space program and doesn't include the occult, you're missing the whole puzzle, folks. So when we go all the way back to ancient Egypt, the strangest time that we're looking at here is the time of Akhenaten. And that is King Tut's father. Most people don't know that, but I'm so clueless. I always think this stuff is common knowledge. But Akhenaten is like the go-to guy for Ancient Aliens. Whenever you see an episode of Ancient Aliens, you pretty much only have to wait about 5 minutes before they bring up Akhenaten, because he was so bizarre. This guy had a cone head, right? He had these weird, massive hips, like a female, and he flipped Egypt on its head. He created the whole concept of monotheism, and that is why people like Sigmund Freud think that Moses and Akhenaten are the same people. I've done an entire study on doctorate studies of Akhenaten being Moses. Very intriguing stuff. But so Akhenaten is always the go-to guy when it comes to Ancient Aliens, because he was depicted with his family. He was depicted as a person. I want to say that, but they all have cone heads and Vulcan ears. I've gone and filmed the displays for you, which was illegal, by the way. So I got that for you. I went to 2 or 3 of the Akhenaten displays.
Nice.
And of course, they always herald it as King Tut, the King Tut exhibit, right? Now, this was right when Obama was inaugurated. So the moment Obama was inaugurated, they started bringing Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the underworld, started making appearances all over the globe. He was in London, he was on the Thames, he was in Texas, and finally found his way to the Denver International Airport, of all places. And as Obama was being heralded as our new president, Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the underworld, was making his way, displaying all of Akhenaten's stuff. And I went to 3 of these, and like I say, I filmed them. And you find that these people are all cone heads with Vulcan ears. And then you realize, wait a minute, this whole family looks really familiar. Wait for it.
Well, so when you say really familiar, I saw one of your videos where you were showing a picture of President Obama and then a picture of a pharaoh, and then you kind of had a split face, and it looked pretty identical.
Yeah, I mean, the Akhenaten Obama comparison is pretty astounding, and it was the first one that I came to. All right, folks, let me just say this. 1985. Everything I tell you, you can go research for yourself. 1985, New York Times, Nature magazine, major peer-reviewed scientific journal, announces we have cloned a mummy from Akhenaten's time period. All right. Now, that does not mean they brought a mummy to life, that they brought a person back. But what this meant was that there was a cell in the mummy wrappings, in the mummy itself, excuse me, capable of somatic cell transfer. Okay, so they thought it was a huge deal that they were able to clone Dolly from an adult stem cell. This had never been done. That's why Dolly was such a big deal. She was not the first clone. They were cloning cattle already. But Dolly was a special significance because it was an adult stem cell, and no one thought that there would be enough or proper DNA in an adult stem cell in order to clone it. So actually, Ian Wilmot, who cloned Dolly, did not expect any attention for what he was doing. And when he found himself on the cover of Time magazine, he was flabbergasted. They didn't even keep data of the original sheep that they had cloned from because they didn't care. Like, there was no money in cloning. He was actually trying to clone a sheep that would produce pharmaceuticals out of its milk. All right. So when we look at 1985 and they cloned the cell from a mummy, this was another big shocker because it's 2,500 years old. It should not be able to have a sufficient DNA to clone. And so this threw out a huge mystery of how mummification saves a cell viable for cloning. No one can answer this question yet, right? We can't even clone. They clone Stalin. We can't mummify. We mummified Stalin. We mummified, or they did, Lenin in Russia, and they're both rotting. There's something about Egyptian cloning or mummification that we don't understand. But what it does is saves a viable cell over thousands of years. Now, the pharaohs themselves had announced that they would return in 3,000 years. Right? It's been just about that. It's 2,500, 2,800 years since Akhenaten. Well, they managed to clone a cell from that moment in 1985. Let me just keep that repeating that. And so I knew that cloning of mummies was already viable and something that we should think about and talk about. And so I brought it up in my third television show called Return of the Nephilim. And this was while W was in office. No one had ever heard of Obama yet. Then Obama comes out. I predict that the next president after W would not be considered an American citizen. Now, this is a bit of the social engineering going on to destroy the Constitution. So this whole now Ted Cruz is now a non-national citizen. They're starting another birther debate because the birther debate is more of a constitutional erosion than anything else. It didn't seem to catch with Barack Obama because never mind all the jokes he made about it, or that he said he was actually born on Krypton and his father was Jor-El, or when he showed his birth video was the Lion King. Never mind all the jokes that he made about it, or the fact that they have a sign in Kenya saying birthplace of Barack Obama. That was all social engineering. It's not really part of the puzzle. But when I saw Obama's face and I saw Akhenaten's face, and other people saw this as well. William Henry was another one who noticed. And I put these two faces together. I took Barack Obama's Time magazine photo and the normal depiction of Akhenaten, and I put the two faces together. I did not squish them. I did not manipulate them. I simply cut them in half and put them side by side, and boom, it is the exact face. All right. So now, as a different prediction, I had said, well, the next fear that they have coming, according to Werner von Braun, the Nazi scientist that came working with Disney and Jack Parsons, the Nazi scientist who brought modern rocketry to America, according to Werner von Braun, the stages would go the Red Scare, terrorism, asteroids, and then aliens. And so we had already been through the Red Scare and the terrorism. So I had said, okay, next thing is asteroids. So I took that depiction of Barack Obama as Akhenaten, which I lovingly call Barakhenaten, and I put an asteroid hurtling towards his head to preempt the next global fear pandemic that they were going to share. And lo and behold, if it wasn't a week later that they announced, oh my God, there's an asteroid heading towards planet Earth going to destroy all life in 2029. And this asteroid is known as Apophis. Now, this shook me to the core because I already had the artwork out there. I already had all the information out there about why it was going to be an asteroid threat. And then it came, and Apophis, the name of the asteroid, is the Satan of Akhenaten's monotheistic religion. All of a sudden, Obama's fighting his ancient nemesis. And I'm flabbergasted, okay? But then it gets even weirder. Somebody says to me, well, have you seen Akhenaten's mother? I'm like, damn, no, I never really thought of looking into his mother, right? Well, it turns out she's a great mystery. She'd been a pharaoh since she was 4 years old. She came out of nowhere. She was obviously a Nubian or a black pharaoh. And she basically ran the kingdom, even though she had her husband, Amenhotep, with her. Now, there are two massive depictions of Queen T, Akhenaten's mother, Queen T, and her husband, Amenhotep the third. And they're called the Colossi of Memnon, or sometimes known as the singing colossi, because they hum when the wind blows. They make noise, they make tones. So these are massive. And when you see them, they have people standing at their kneecaps. And, they were depicted like this. So this was Akhenaten's mother. And one look at her and I'm like, oh my God, this is Michelle. This is Michelle Obama, without a doubt. Now, I split those faces in half and put them together. I took Michelle Obama's high school photo and I took the Queen T depiction and I split them in half and put them together. And I left the images there for you to do this for yourself. Now, you can't even tell that I did it. They are so exact that you cannot tell there are two faces in the image. And you can do it for yourself. The images are there on my Obama cloning article. Try it for yourself. You'll be blown away. Okay, so now we're talking about a mother-son duo here with Michelle and Barack, Akhenaten and Queen T. But then you start to notice that Akhenaten, out of all the norms of Egypt, depicted himself with his children, and most especially 2 of his 6 daughters are constantly depicted. Well, I'm sitting there looking at this puzzle and I'm like, no, this can't be. 2 daughters as well. Let's have a look. And I looked at his 2 daughters and they are Malaya and Sasha. Exactly. I mean, Sasha's got a little bit pudgier cheeks, a little rounder face. Malaya's a little more gaunt. They are an exact match. So now we're talking 4 families or 4 people from a single family that are identical. This is statistically impossible. This is no case of reincarnation. This is no happenstance. The only plausible solution to this puzzle is cloning. And it's a mind blower. Okay, I released Obama cloning in the coming space war to time with the moment that Barack Obama released the restrictions on federal funding to stem cell research. Now, that sounds like this crazy, obtuse science that's going to give us, make people walk again with spinal injuries and whatnot. But it is actually code for human cloning, stem cell research. This is human cloning. And what you find is that in the time of Ian Wilmot, when he was cloning Dolly, there was no money in cloning because there was no federal funding to cloning. There was no reason other than trying to manufacture cattle like they're doing at the big Chinese clone lab right now. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
Look into the Chinese cloning factory. Now, this is Dr. Huang Suk, who is known as the disgraced cloner because he came forward saying he was cloning humans, and then they proved him to be a fraud. But what they had really done was catch him on some sort of embezzlement. They caught him on, some fraudulent papers, but he was brought forward to disgrace the concept of human cloning. And Dr. Huang Suk went on to continue cloning. And he now, if you've heard of Clone Your Pet, guys, you just go to Dr. Huang and clone it.
I just want to jump in. That reminds me of the movie The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger that came out in the either late 90s, early 2000s. And they had that big thing about clone your pets. And I said, that's how they're going to push it to the masses. They're first going to start cloning pets, and then they're going to say, oh, you can clone your deceased relatives.
Yeah, exactly. And let me just talk about The Sixth Day for a minute, because that was a very interesting production company known as Phoenix Pictures. All right. Now, the Phoenix, of course, is this death and resurrection symbol. And when you watch that movie, they also did From Hell, which is Alan Moore's depiction of Jack the Ripper as a Freemason. And in From Hell, you will get to see the first ritual of Freemasonry, the entered apprentice. Almost exact, not quite, but almost. So if you want to get an idea of what a Masonic ritual is, watch From Hell. Now, Phoenix Pictures also put out Holes with Sigourney Weaver with Disney that was all about child labor camps. But the sixth day was very curious. And the reason I bring up Phoenix pictures, not just the death and resurrection symbol that is their title, but they strike a friction match to boil up to the fiery phoenix. Now, if you look up the word Lucifer in the dictionary, it's going to say Christian, Satan, and then a friction match. All right. So all of this is Luciferian. Every bit of this is Luciferian. And that's what most of the signs and symbols that we see, we call satanic. Now, I make a very strong distinction between Satan and Lucifer. Too big of a topic for this show, but I have covered this numerous times in some different ways just to understand the difference between what the Luciferians considered Lucifer, which is reason and man's power over manipulation of nature, and the idea of Satan, which is more of a stumbling block sent to you by God to cause you to go in a different direction. Very different concepts, Luciferians and Satanism.
I guess if you go read the 11 commandments on the Church of Satan's website, it seems like it's more of a humanism versus actually believing in a deity.
Absolutely. Satanists don't believe in a Satan. Yeah, it's a whole different puzzle. It's might is right and very animalistic ideas of the world. So, Satanists don't believe in Satan. That's a different, that's why you got to study each group, where they come from, how the Church of Satan was formed, who these people were, what their real goals were. This is the type of stuff that I look into. The sixth day, as you're saying, showed all of this stuff through a Luciferian symbolism. And at that time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was the star of the sixth day and was cloned, was battling George H.W. Bush over this stem cell debate. Arnold wanted stem cell funding. He wanted federal funding for stem cell research. George W. Bush brought a bunch of stem cell babies that would have died in the experiments and brought them up on stage to counter this whole concept of stem cell research and shut the bill down. But Barack Obama, our clone himself, came straight out in front of the public, told everyone he's releasing the restrictions on federal funding to stem cell research, but we cannot, and these were his words, cannot allow human cloning for reproduction. Now, the fact that he mentioned this straight out of his mouth should tell you something. And it's in my video. If you don't believe me, you can go watch it come out of his mouth. But in his legalese, that's leaving out the concept of human cloning for experimentation, which is absolutely fine by their standards, by what he said and what the federal funding is going to. So now this Chinese factory is going to clone 100,000 cattle this year, hoping to clone millions over the next couple of years. And the FDA approved your eating of cloned meat back in 2008. So they're on board. The cloning factory is happening. Human cloning is happening. All of this is happening. It's terrible. On the news. Nothing I'm saying to you is obscure. Go look it up.
So first it's, it's okay to put basically derivative of Agent Orange on the majority of the corn crops that are out there. That same stuff that was made in Vietnam to wipe out a lot of the poor people out there is now basically a derivative of that is used as one of the main weed killers out there by the same company. It's pretty fascinating. So yeah, now it's going to be cloned meat. And it makes me wonder, Freeman, do you think that they've already been doing that secretly? Do you think that maybe McDonald's or Burger King has some special laboratory where they're making this cloned meat? I mean, heck, they've already came out saying that many of the samples in fast food restaurants, the meats have human DNA.
Yeah, like I was saying, it's not going to be, this is already 6 years. No, 8 years that this has been going on, folks. This isn't in the future. It's already happening. So yeah, absolutely. Roy Kroc, who founded McDonald's, also a Freemason. And their golden arches are a sign of Freemasonry because they were most known for gold and arches, when they were known as the Knights Templar. So, yeah, absolutely. You're already, folks, you're already eating cloned meat. The FDA agreed to that 8 years ago. It's and the clone labs are on their way. The Chinese clone lab with the corporation that's working with Dr. Huang Suk on the clone lab for cattle is known as Boya Life. And I don't know, that's such a weird name. We got Clone Aid, we got Boya Life. Uh, but yeah, no, it's happening, folks. This is not out there stuff. This is in your news. I get alerts, Google alerts for this every single day. If you put a Google alert out for human cloning, you'll see it's going on, and the president's standing behind it 100%. Well, let me share a clone story.
Please.
Now, this is another one you can see for yourself. A man, okay, there was an Australian group that came over to America to film a TV show called Random America. And they just went around and met interesting people. And in this show, they go to meet a fellow who cloned his Brahma bull. All right. So we're talking about a 2,000-pound bull that was the family pet. And this bull would hang out and have its little spot that it would always sit around, and it played with the family and such. Well, its name was Chance, and Chance died. And they loved this bull so much that they spent, $100,000, $200,000 to clone this Brahma bull. Now, they show this bull in the TV show, Random America, and this bull that's cloned looks super sinister. He looks so evil. He's got these big black rings around his eyes, and it does not look like the original Chance. They called this cloned one Second Chance. And Second Chance was a monster. Second Chance gouged this owner numerous times, even to the point of ripping his scrotum open with his horns. And the owner was like, well, we're going to wait till he's at least 7 to see if he's becomes as nice as Chance does, or Chance was. And he's living with this crazy psycho bull. And what I find most curious about cloning is that when you give birth, there's a energy inside the woman that sparks that cell to life and tells it to start to divide. Well, in cloning, that spark is artificially generated by electricity. They shock the egg with the electricity to make it think that it's alive, and then implant it into the surrogate mother. Now, Michael Jackson, back to him, who was into all of this stuff. Nobody even knows who the parents of his youngest baby, Blanket, I don't know his real name, they just call him Blanket, no one knows who the parents are, because the mother that gave birth wasn't the mother of the egg, or and his other 2 children, Paris and I forgot the other one's name. They also had surrogate mothers. I mean, they're white. They have blonde hair and blue eyes, folks. These are Michael Jackson's children, right? So he was into all of this, designer babies, right there, and already happening.
Well, so let's jump back to The Sixth Day, the movie that we were speaking about a moment ago, when they had the main guy that, not Arnold Schwarzenegger, but the bad guy that was the head of the company that did this cloning, and he got shot and killed multiple times, but he kept basically coming back to life because they would just plug him into a new body, and then bam, voila, here you are. There's so much speculation out there now, too, that there could possibly be many of these movie stars and famous people in Hollywood, whether it be the music industry or the movie industry, could possibly be clones as well. How do you think they're cloned, man? And I mean, is it just a plug and play process now at the top level?
Yeah, you really got to wonder, because mind transfer technologies is the other puzzle in this, and that's what they needed with in the Sixth Day. So they would clone the body, but of course the clone is not the person. And so they would then take a mind sample of this person and transmit it into it so that he would have the memories, and that's how he became the person again. So mind transfer technologies, there are a number of companies working on this. The most public one is known as the Blue Brain Project. And I always find it interesting how many blues we have out there with the blue beam, blue brain,
Blue
uh,
blood.
yeah, blue blood, over and over again. Blue book, of course, chasing the extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
And so the Blue Brain Project is run by a man called Henry Markram, and he is working on creating a rat brain inside of a computer for mind transfer technologies. Now, this is the open science. This is the one that you can learn about. So you can imagine somebody with a massive computer. Okay, so here's the problem. Henry Markram does not have the processing capabilities of transferring a human mind. This requires what is known as exabytes of information or petabytes of information. Now, to kind of give you an example, all written works in the entire planet of all time would fit into 5 petabytes. So this is the type of processing power necessary for mind transfer technologies. There's only one corporation, one company, and one computer in the world that claims that has the power of pushing petabytes, and that is the LHC grid at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider computer network. CERN, of course, had created the World Wide Web. They are the ones that have the technologies to produce mind transfer technology. Now, CERN, of course, has a corporate logo that looks like 666 with a hyperdimensional portal. They have Shiva, god of destruction, standing out in front, and very esoteric things going on inside. If you've ever seen that mysterious video they put out with the dancers, that was bizarre. They even filmed a horror movie in CERN at one point. But this computer technology, we're starting to move into another direction with quantum computers. And well, guess who has all the robots from DARPA and all of the quantum computers? Google. Yeah, that's right. They've got a complete DNA lab in their Calico division. Google has bought all of the DARPA war military robots, and we're quickly going towards another Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Terminator, or Terminator Salvation, with Google, who has a quantum computer, AI technology. They bought that as well. DNA lab, one of the biggest in the world, and let's see, mind transfer robots. Okay, so now a few other examples of this mind transfer.
And isn't Ray Kurzweil now one of the leading guys with Google's technology and transhuman movement, etc.?
I hadn't heard that, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit. The singularity, absolutely, you know, this is what they consider that moment when we enhance ourselves in that way. Now, there's a couple of other open science projects that you can look into for yourself. Check out Robonaut 2, who is on the International Space Station. Robonaut 2 is a telepresence robot. That means that you can connect your mind to this robot on the International Space Station and manipulate it as if it was your body. There is the X-37B, which is a robotic space plane, which has been orbiting the planet for almost a year now. And it also is a telepresence robot. It is a robotic space plane it's on its 4th mission. So we're looking at years that this robotic space plane has been orbiting the planet doing God knows what, because it's a secret military project. Now, I watched it launch from Cape Canaveral. I was there. So they can't hide these launches, but what they can hide is what the X-37B is doing, because it is a military program. These are both telepresence robots capable of mind transfer technologies. Don't believe me? Go to Wikipedia, look it up for yourself. It's true. Robonaut 2, also known as R2, and the X-37B, the robotic space plane. Now, here's where it gets a little more bizarre. I was talking about Henry Markram and his Blue Brain project. Well, there was a time where they announced all of the alien ambassadors that we now have on planet Earth. So Linda Rothschild is the extraterrestrial ambassador for NASA.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, this is open, folks. This is not hidden. Look it up. Maslin Othman is the head of Office of Outer Space Affairs and is the extraterrestrial ambassador for the UN. Now, they decided to hold a big meeting at the Royal Society where all of the great heads of science come together. And in this group, they included Paul Davies, who wrote the book, Are We Alone? And you can see a picture of Hillary Clinton hanging out with the Rockefellers holding that book. Paul Davies was at the Royal Society meeting. Maslin Othman, Linda Rothschild, all of the extraterrestrial sciences were there. And Henry Markram of the Blue Brain Project was there as well in this massive meeting and deciding what to do when extraterrestrials can contact us.
Well, and a lot of people think that the Rothschilds and some of these really elite aristocratic bloodlines that have been in positions of power for hundreds, if not thousands, or even longer of years could possibly be from extraterrestrial origins, like the Nephilim that's talked about in the Bible. What are your thoughts on those connections?
Yeah, it definitely it fits the bill. These people don't die, you know. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if they were blood drinkers. And yeah, we have to deal with this concept of the Nephilim. If we're going to accept any biblical study, then you have to accept that the Nephilim were there in the days of old and they are there now. That's what the Bible says. So if you're going to accept any of that, you got to accept that. And these were giants, according to most accounts. But yeah, there is definitely something to these bloodlines, and that has been the key ingredient. You'll find out Britney Spears is related to Hillary, Brad Pitt's related to George Bush, or maybe I got that backwards. Madonna is related, and I have it all in my lecture and the tree, the family tree, so that you can see that even the celebrities are of the same bloodline as all of these elite that we're discussing. So yeah, I do believe, and I also believe that the DNA connection makes them better receptors for this reptilian energy. So when they channel these entities, it's far easier for them to be in communication with them.
And you were talking earlier about the seances that the Thule Society was doing, and they claimed to have made contact with this artificial intelligence that was going around the globe. Do you think that that could have been from the infamous Black Knight satellite that has supposedly been, estimated to be, or supposedly approximately 13,000 years old?
Yeah, it's very, very possible. That's the one that has, come up on the radar so many times that it would make sense that this would be the Spectre vehicle. Now, the Thule Society, or Thule, however people say it, they formed the Nazi Party. They were openly communicating with interdimensional beings. That was their charter. And then they formed the Nazi Party. And of course, then the SS and all of the lead Nazis were in performing these rituals. And they came forward and said, don't worry about Hitler. We sing the tune. We have got him in communication with them. Now, as I said, Adolf Hitler was running around with works of Madame Blavatsky. He was absolutely a practicing occultist and had complete understanding of all of this situation. Right. And then his corporate logo that he put on the Volkswagen, right? So the Volkswagen was the Nazis' answer, the car for the people. He was supposed to be the people's president, right? Right. So he made the Volkswagen so that everyone could have a car. And of course, the corporate logo for the Volkswagen is two V's interlaced. Now, the VV symbolism, I picked that up as I started to study the Hebrew connections to corporate logos, and I came to Phillips 66. And I said, well, what is Philip 66? If I can relate everything else to a Kabbalistic ritual, then I should be able to relate the number 66. And I looked it up, and it was the number of the abyss. It was the number of the fallen angels, or what's known in magic as the Qliphoth, sometimes represented as excrement. And this is what W means. And when you take the W and you take the two V's and you interlace them, like the Volkswagen logo, then you get three V's, which Hitler would absolutely know equates to 666 in Hebrew. Now we start to look at who Hitler was removing from the system, and you clearly and quickly find that it's any other magical order. So he removed the Freemasons. He removed the Jews. He removed anyone that had knowledge of these magical practices, and became the elite magician out of this whole situation.
And do you think that that's why most religions today portray any type of occult practice or even just mind over matter practice in essence as something that's evil that will lead you astray because the elitists or people at the top levels want to keep that system of control and power for themselves?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I think everyone should look into the esoteric. Oh, excuse me again. I think everyone should look into the esoteric, that you should have a working knowledge of these magical practices to understand what is going on, because you're so caught up in the show, the facade of it all, and you don't see the deeper, most devious magical practices going on. But that being said, I do not believe all practices of magic are evil. When you begin to study magic, you quickly learn that a vast majority of it is Christian based. So when you do your pentagram ritual, and that is to summon an entity, invoke an entity into your being or into a room, you use the Lord's Prayer in Hebrew to open that portal. So when you also find that the archangels are all called upon during this pentagram ritual, Raphael, Gabriel, Uriel, you call upon all of these archangels within magical practices. So yeah, I think that people just having a trigger reaction to the occult and not looking into this at all, then trying to, that's where my show was intending to be different than anything I was hearing anywhere on the globe, because you were only getting this information from Christian fundamentalists who just said, oh, that's Satan. Oh, that's Satan. I came in and I clarified, I identified, and then I investigated what these occult practices mean, what they do, why they're happening. And that's where my show differed greatly from anything that was on the air at the time.
I know that you're also very knowledgeable with mind control and some of the techniques, etc., that are used. I was hoping you could share some of that information with us.
Yeah, trauma-based mind control also really relates into the left-hand path of magic. Now, the left-hand path, and that's why you see all of the artists covering their left eye. This is a sign of the left path, or the dark side of magic. And of course, Star Wars is now promoting that so heavily with the Disney J.J. Abrams and the ideas of the dark side. But it is trauma-based mind control is a horrific practice that really came out of the occult. If you go back to Crowley and his cult that he had inside of the Loch Ness house, you'll find that they were eating feces, that they were debasing themselves in the most greatest ways that they could. This was supposed to purify your soul by doing the most horrific things you can imagine. And trauma-based mind control came out of this, went into the projects like MK Ultra and Project Monarch, and they started to use these techniques. Now, if you want to know exactly or nearly what trauma-based mind control entails, the movie The Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher lays it out step by step. And you will find that movie to be very horrific. And if you got a copy of Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler's book, how to create your own undetectable Illuminati mind control slave, you can lay that book down side by side while watching the movie and see that it almost goes chapter for chapter in the effects of trauma-based mind control and how they are done. So yeah, the butterfly effect, which is a curious name because part of this is to open the soul to these entities. And Crowley wrote a book called The Moon Child. And the Moon Child was an idea that these magicians have to be able to incarnate a god form into a child. Now, Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, they worked on this heavily while exploding nuclear devices. All right, they were actually putting babies in. I mean, this isn't confirmed, but this is the story. In chambers under the nuke explosions, and trying to create this moon child. Now, the reason I connect this to the Butterfly Effect movie is that the second title to Crowley's book, The Moon Child, it's called The Butterfly Net. And of course, the Monarch program comes into this very heavily, and you'll see the Monarch symbolism everywhere. Now, the reason the Monarch is so important to this trauma-based mind control and what we're talking about with the genealogy of the Nephilim, the monarch butterfly was noted to pass information on through genetic memory. So it takes 3 generations of a monarch flock to make it to their mating grounds. How does the second generation know where to go? The first generation died before they got there. Somehow the second generation's carrying on. Now, they've just done major studies, and I think it was Johns Hopkins University that came forward and said, absolutely, genetic memory is a reality. So that means we have memory going back in our DNA millennia, and that some people can retain this knowledge. And especially within trauma-based mind control, when the brain is broken into fractures and you have all these subcompartments, then you start to get more into these magical practices. And Brittany is a classic example of what a monarch might appear like, with all her different personalities. And then even Steven Spielberg made this a popular notion by putting out the TV show, The United States of Tara, where they basically asked you, wouldn't you like to have a bunch of multiple personalities so that you can have one deal with this problem and another deal with that problem? Which altar would you choose? So they have popularized this thing. And Project Monarch is openly mentioned in Disney's Marvel, The Avengers. We find the effects of trauma-based mind control portrayed constantly in the Star Wars Clone Wars animation series. They put most of the characters, and especially the young children, in that cartoon through trauma-based mind control situations, such as sticking a child into an electrified cage. That happens in that child's cartoon is one of the things. There's numerous, though, if you watch it. So it has become so popularized now that it's just a common social norm. And we are all now victims of this trauma-based mind control through the Hollywood screen.
You know, and I found it fascinating. I read an article a couple years ago, and it talked about how if somebody was watching a particular event, the part of the brain that got activated in that individual was the same part of the people that were actually involved in the process. So if you saw somebody get hit by a car, the guy that got hit by the car, the people hitting that guy in the car, you're experiencing the same thing they are in essence and a physiological level. So I've often wondered if these, giant films that are portrayed around the globe that bring in hundreds of millions of dollars, this new Star Wars film that I think is going to bring in well over $1 billion, if it does have a global impact and they're able to harness that energy. So, I find it fascinating. Also, I don't know, have you had a chance to see that new 3-part series by Sci-Fi with it was based on the Arthur Clarke novel Childhood's End?
No, I'll definitely have to check that out. I have read the book, and I think I saw.
Oh, you did?
Oh yeah,
Great. Well,
sure.
okay. So if you read the book, even better. I mean, I definitely need to read the book. I'm sure it's a lot more detailed. But in this 3-part series, they portray these overlords that come down as what most Christians would call the devil, but there's a bunch of them, fallen angels, I guess. And the whole thing is so Luciferian because, and this is going to be a spoiler alert for those that haven't seen the series, so you may want to watch it first or whatever if you don't know what happens, but all the children at the end go up into this spaceship that gets taken off into a hell-like planet, and these overlords look like a bunch of satans or a bunch of devils walking around, but they have compassion for the people as they take them over. But the one thing that I find very peculiar is the all-seeing eye that is in the movie, and how the ultimate God at the very end that a human is able to talk to says, well, no, you're not going to be a part of the life form. You're going to disappear. The only thing that you're going to be remembered by is memories, but your children and this new age is all going to be a part of the life essence. So I found that as very Luciferian if you looked at it from that standpoint. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the whole shocker that, where we got our depiction of the devil was actually extraterrestrials. Well, we find now that the UN, who also, as I said, has an extraterrestrial ambassador, has a room for channeling entities um, with a cube in it. Um, they they are now working on agents of change, and you can go look that up too. The agents of change. They no longer care about what adults think. It doesn't matter. It's the children they're after. And Walt Disney Studios, these are the worst perpetrators of social engineering on the planet. Who do you think brought you Monsanto? Walt Disney Co. All right. If you look into Walt Disney Co. and we have 3 books on this now. It's called Weird Stuff. And you definitely want to get copies of Weird Stuff. You can get it at freemantv.com on the shop page, or just do a Google search for Weird Stuff. We outline all of this. We database and tell you the whole story of Walt Disney, and then also of Walt Disney Co. Now, you realize Walt Disney Company and Walt Disney Studios, they own Miramax, ESPN, CNN, Marvel, Star Wars. All of the major social engineering programs come straight through Walt Disney Co. And they're a major player in all of this. When you realize, like, my dad built nukes for a corporation known as Martin Marietta. Martin Marietta sponsors a ride in Walt Disney. All of the rides in Walt Disney are sponsored by Military Industrial Complex. All of the money that goes into Walt Disney comes out and goes straight into military secret projects. They have engineered what we think of as the future. So you go on Space Mountain and you get traumatized on the roller coaster. You may enjoy it, but it's still trauma. And when you come out of that trauma, you're in a bit more of a theta state or an alpha state, whichever one it was. My science.
Sure, but you're definitely under some deeper level of thought.
Yeah. And what happens is you're put on this nice, slow moving people mover, a little treadmill, and you're shown what your future will be. Now, this has been going on since, I was one of the first people to walk into Epcot. I grew up in Orlando. So, my mom met Walt Disney. Let's put it that way. So
do you ever wonder, I'm sorry, I just had to ask
right.
because you brought that up. Do you ever wonder if you might have been a part of some type of MK programming or some offshoot of that?
I definitely do. I think that my mom spared me. My dad was so bizarre, and my dad went through trauma, and his father traumatized him. But I think my mother broke the chain. But that being said, I've had some strange, mysterious events. And one was when I was in elementary school, I was put into this special advanced learning thing in elementary school where I was stuck in this room with all these cards and I had to study every card and learn all this data. And I don't even know what was programmed into me about that. And when I asked my parents about that special class, they had no knowledge of it whatsoever. They had no idea that I had been put through that. When I was in the Civil Air Patrol, and I won the contest for selling the most candy bars. I got to fly a Cessna at 16 to Alabama to go to the headquarters of the Civil Air Patrol. And well, strange story I'll just share with you as an anecdote. On the way, I'm flying this airplane. I'm sitting next to my commander, Commander Radar. All right, swear to God that was his name. Commander Radar was the pilot, but he allowed me to fly this Cessna for a bit. And while I'm flying through the air, Cadet Parrish, I'll never forget that kid, takes a piece of stripping tape off a package in the back of the airplane and begins to strangle me while I'm flying the airplane. Now, what was really bizarre to me is that I'm freaking out. I let go of the steering wheel. Commander Radar takes over, and maybe this is just common pilot practice, but he never said a word. He never reacted to the fact that I was being strangled by this guy in the back seat. And then we land at the Air Force Base, and we're flown in a C-150, one of those big cargo planes, and to the main base of the headquarters. And I just punched Parrish in the arm. Like, I'm so nonviolent. Like, I probably didn't even bruise him, but I had to do something because no one did anything. I got strangled while flying a plane. I punched him in the arm and nothing was ever said. But what's a mystery to me is I don't remember anything after that. Nothing. I have no idea. And so that's pretty bizarre to me. So I do wonder because my mother, now speaking of genetic memory and how we carry the lineage of our families, my mother was abused by the Catholics and raised by the Catholic nuns and was abused by them. And then she was rescued by the Nazis. Okay, my mom was born in Luxembourg, raised in France. She had to run from Germany to France to escape the Nazis, but the Nazis rescued my mom from the Catholics, and the Nazis went below her Catholic school, and they brought up these children's skulls and sex implements, sex toys and things, and said, "This is what we're rescuing you from." So my mom then became a Nazi youth. And whenever I would joke about Pope Ratzinger and talk to my mom about it, going, well, he's a Nazi youth from Bavaria. He's our Pope. The current Pope's a Jesuit, which is even worse. But old Ratzinger, who mysteriously quit, was a Nazi youth from Bavaria. And my mom would say, well, I'm a Nazi youth from Bavaria, and what could I do? So I got my mom, who was raised by a witch in France, who was a renowned healer. People would come from hundreds of miles to have this lady that took care of my mom, this witch, heal their cattle from warts and stuff by circling under fire under the moonlight. And I actually have that spell. I actually have how to do that. And my mom showed it to me. So this is my mom's side. And then she's married to the grand potentate of Bavarian Freemasonry in Kaiserslautern. And this is the man that brought my father up through Freemasonry. And now my father, he was on Killer One submarine with Jimmy Carter. I got pictures of them together. He was, like I said, in Project Blue Book, chasing flying saucers. He was building nukes when I was born. And he was raised as a lifetime. I broke the chain. I'm the first in my family to not join Freemasonry. So that's my dad's side. So now you got all those genetics boiling up in me. And I come forward with all this data. And it's not until I'm researching it, telling it, and covering it that I learn that my family was all involved in all that in the background. I didn't know any of this stuff. Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it certainly does make you think that DNA does have a much more, it's a lot more powerful than most people would speculate in the scientific community. So that's incredible, man. That's certainly very wow. I can't even imagine being in a plane for the first time. I'm flying this thing, and then somebody strangled me, and then nothing said about it.
Yeah, man, that's
really
shocked
weird.
me. Isn't that bizarre?
That sounds like some type of possible trauma based, because if the guy said something, it was like, hey, knock it off, immediately the other guy just stopped it or did something. You'd be like, yeah, okay, he was just being a goofball. But the fact that nothing was even said and then you forgot everything after that makes you wonder. I've got a friend that I've known since elementary school, and this guy has scars and stuff, and he thinks he was a part of the Montauk Project or whatever, and had some just horrific stuff done to him, and he reminds me a lot of that guy on the new movie America, or it's a movie that came out recently that you can rent if you go to Redbox or whatever. It's called American Ultra.
Yeah.
Have you seen that movie?
Oh my God. I thought that it was just going to be kind of a covert reference to MK Ultra, but no, it's open.
Oh yeah.
Open. Straightforward MK Ultra programming right there as your Hollywood entertainment. And as a little side note, I was in a movie with Dan Fogler. Now, most people don't know Dan Fogler by name, but you'll probably know his movies. He was in Good Luck Chuck, Taking Woodstock, Fanboys, the ping pong movie, Balls of Fury. Dan Fogler.
Yeah.
He's in Interstellar or one of those.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
So, and he had his own TV show, Man Up. Well, anyway, I was in a movie with him, basically based on my life. I was the inspiration for the movie Don Peyote, which you can watch on my YouTube channel. He gave me permission to give the movie away for free. But we filmed that movie over 2 years, and I took Dan to all these different Mason temples and all these weird places. All of that got cut from the film. I'm lucky I'm still in the movie. I think if it wasn't based on me, I wouldn't be in it at all. But we were taken to Topher Grace's house, and I spent the night at Topher Grace's house, who's in American Ultra. And we left him a copy of Weird Stuff. Now, Topher wasn't there. Topher was off doing whatever, celebrities do. There was a script for True Blood there. I was so tempted to read it because it was like confidential, but I didn't have time. Dan Fogler was doing too many bong rips in Topher's kitchen, but we left Topher a copy of Weird Stuff, which does outline all of this celebrity mind control over and over again. And we have 3 copies now, three different versions of Weird Stuff, 1, 2, and 2.5. And this takes all of this knowledge out of the internet and puts it as a tool for you to share this information with your friends. We designed Weird Stuff, our book, as a guide, and we put full color imagery in there so that anyone that picks it up will have questions. And so it was actually designed as a tool to get open communication, dialogue with your friends, because you know how hard it is to get them to sit there and watch a video with you. You just lay a copy of Weird Stuff out on your table. They're going to pick it up. They're going to see Lady Gaga. They're going to see Britney Spears. They're going to see Walt Disney. They're going to see Star Wars. They're going to see the Aurora shooting. They're going to see Sandy Hook. All of these things are covered in there. And it'll open up stuff for people to talk to. So we managed to leave a copy for Topher Grace. We've also given a copy to Weird Al Yankovic after he came out with his aluminum foil. Have you seen Foil?
No, but he's great. I definitely got to watch that. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Oh, go see Foil right now. Like, folks, when we get off the air, go watch the Foil video. It's based on Royal, but it's epic. It's so epic. And, strange thing, we were watching the video Foil, Weird Al, and we had a little 5-year-old with us. And maybe he was, about 5. And I can't think of that guy's name, but the one character, why can't I think of his name? He rips off his face and he's a reptilian at the end of the thing. And this freaked that kid out so bad. Oh my God. You know, it really shows you how the impact has, because we didn't expect any of that. We're all laughing and this kid is freaking. And oh my God. But Foyle, you know, was a very conspiratorial. We really wanted to talk with Weird Al about it, but they wouldn't let us talk to him. So we could just hand him the magazines, the books, and leave it at that and hope, you know. I did end up with Weird Al's phone number, but I haven't called him yet. And then we also went to see Cat Williams for his conspiracy theory tour, and we got a couple of copies to him backstage. So we've been sneaking these books into the celebrities' hands, like Topher Grace, for some time now, trying to get this knowledge more public. But then, you know, lo and behold, they come out with a damn movie, American Ultra, which basically, you know, how much do they know? They know a lot. These celebrities know. They know what's going on. They know what situation they're in, and they know there's no getting out alive. I mean, look at Chuck Barris. He was the guy who created the Gong Show and the Dating Game, the Newlywed Show, I think, as well, right? All of those old television game shows.
Right.
And Chuck Barris comes forward with a movie and a book called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. And he nearly admits that he was a contract killer for the CIA, and that when they would win the competition on the dating game, they would schedule the romantic vacation in Romania where he could go and do the assassination where he needed to go. And there's a full movie, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, a book. And at the end, they interview Chuck Barris, and he definitely lost his marbles over the years. And they ask him point blank, you know, is this story true? And he's like, I'm not going to confirm or deny it. But this is the layer that it's at. There is a Hollywood army. I mean, if Matt Damon shows up at your door, you better be scared. You know.
Well, you know, that's the thing that I got to ask is, would you say, Freeman, that most people in Hollywood at that level that are in these blockbuster movies, TV shows that bring in hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, do you feel that they are under that program at some level, that they can be controlled, or if need be, some type of trigger word, bang? You know, like
Without
look at Lady
doubt.
Gaga. That one interview, do you remember in Britain when somebody in the audience said, "Oh my God," or the interviewer said, "Oh my God," and as soon as he said that, Lady Gaga did this weird. She had this weird trance look on her face, and then she put her hand over her eye, just like you talked about.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing this quite a bit as we start to really understand the situation. Beyonce in some weird mesmerized state. We saw Katy Perry being flashed an obey symbol by Russell Brand and going into a weird altered state. We're seeing this more and more. And yeah, it's actually my personal belief that Paris Hilton was able to get a number of the trigger codes and use them against the other girls, which were known as the Anti-Panty Group. And this was Britney Spears, Lisa Lohan, Lindsay Lohan, and a couple of others. And I believe, Paris Hilton was using these triggers. Now, Paris Hilton is only famous because she managed to get a sex tape and use it against the people, as these type of handlers do. And I think she got a hold of the triggers and started using them against these girls, causing them to go out and flash their vaginas to everyone and laughing it up. You know, of course, Britney ended up shaving her head and scrawling 666 on her forehead, claiming she was the Antichrist, and spoke in a satanic language that scared her bodyguard enough that he came out on Montel to talk about it, ran around naked in a British accent, and all the things that we're seeing from them. This is not normal. This is not just some drug-induced frenzy. This is, you know, trauma-based mind control coming out forward. And so, of course, they had to punish Paris Hilton, and they gave her those few days in jail to show her that she was just like the Goyim if she went against the leaders.
It's interesting you brought up that term, the Goyim. I was going to ask you, earlier, and I'm glad you brought it up, just making me think about this. A lot of people speculate that the Protocols of Zion is an actual handbook for the people that control the majority of the media, the scientific communities, the corporations, the banking, etc. And that's talked about the goyim, if they tell you that they're going to do something to you and you're not a part of their bloodline, then it's okay for them and they can get away with it karma free. Some people speculate that's why they put certain things in movies that predate events that have just crazy similarities. Do you think that that might be a connection, or do you have any information on that?
Yeah, yeah, there is definitely an esoteric practice of that where uh, if you give the free will agreement, then it's all acceptable, and the entities, the demons, however you want to put it, have open license because you did not deny them. So we do give our open free will agreement to these situations by watching the films and accepting this data into us. Now, as far as the protocols of the Elders of Zion, I did do a research onto that, and it was proven to be fraud is not the right term. It was actually used by numerous people on numerous occasions to vilify certain groups. And as far as I can tell, it is originally based off of Machiavelli's The Prince, and was basically, you could set the prince down side by side. Well, there was another book called the Dialogues in Hell between Montesquieu and Machiavelli. And then that book was further plagiarized to become the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. But so it goes back to Machiavelli and the Prince and the ideas of empire, which of course we're getting a lot of Star Wars into that situation. So yeah, I mean, definitely this whole thing hinges on us giving our free will agreement to the situation.
Now, do you ever get followed around by very peculiar vehicles, Suburbans with tinted black windows, or you have strange stuff happen to you, Freeman?
You would think I would, wouldn't you? Uh, and all the things that I do, and how much wandering I've done, and how many people's couches I've slept on. 2012, we took a school bus around the entire United States in a sacred spiral, following the same path as the merry pranksters of the 60s without even realizing it. And we took a school bus around the entire United States and just stayed with fans of the show. You would think there would be plenty of opportunity for them to send some fear my way, but this has never happened. And I hear now that Art Bell just quit the air again because somebody is shooting at him. None of this has ever happened to me. I've never been placed in a position where I felt like I was in danger. And even all of my friendship agenda, where I go around and just stay at random strangers' houses for years, has not brought any sort of thing like that. One curious note, one time the bus broke down, and I turned around and there was a man standing right behind me. And he's like, "Hey, I can fix that." I didn't even know what was wrong with the bus yet. And he took one look and said, "Oh yeah, here, we can fix this. No problem. I got a friend that can do all this." So there was like this mysterious helper. Well, so we start traveling, and he takes me into town to get the parts that we need to repair the school bus. And he tells me he's an ex-NSA agent, and that he was working in China, I think, and that he had won the lottery. And he was showing us his numerous houses along the way. That was kind of a mysterious one. And another time, I had a Chinese refugee fall into my lap and get stuck with me by losing his passport. And so I had this estranged Chinese refugee living with me for a time. Turns out he was working for Chinese intelligence. He told us about it. He was quite crazy, but at the same time, you couldn't couldn't ignore his stories or what he was telling us, and he was actually there to infiltrate college students in China, well, more especially Kazakhstan, and he ends up locked in my place for a number of months until he mysteriously finds his passport right where he left it in the first place, and that was pretty bizarre.
Weird. The Chinese government checking you out, huh? They're dropping off.
He's like the famous Freeman. Talk about W. I love that guy, man. He cracked me up.
That's
But
awesome.
he was the Chinese Borat.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, at least he was exciting, right? At least he had a good sense of, or a very peculiar sense of humor, interesting sense of humor,
Well,
nonetheless.
just to throw this out there, I have another video known as New World Capitals, and that deals with the new pre-planned cities that are being built in esoteric fashion. And Kazakhstan, which was used in Borat, and when they say that they're in Kazakhstan, and they show him with a bunch of goat herders and a sexy prostitute, right?
Right.
Well, Kazakhstan is the most modern country in the world, and it is where all of the rockets launched to the International Space Station from the Russian Cosmodrome. It houses the most sophisticated pre-planned city ever crafted, known as Astana. And if you look at Astana from a satellite view, you will find that it is actually a seal of Solomon to incarnate demons. Solomon was one of the greatest magicians listed in the magical practices. He had 72 seals that were used to build the temple by controlling demons. And these sigils are now the street plans for these new cities. And Astana is one of them. Now, the word Astana in Kazakhstan means threshold, therefore doorway. And you have to walk through a glass pyramid in order to enter the city, and this is known as the Pyramid of Peace, and this is where the world religion gathers. And then once you get through that, you come to the two pillars of Atlantis, or the two pillars of Solomon's Temple, or, there's constantly this two pillars of Freemasons. And then in the middle of that is a giant buckyball, a geodesic ball on a spire, standing way high above the city. And you go up inside of that, and there's this golden triangle with the handprint of the architect in it. And you look at it, and it's very much exactly the thing that you see them turn the pyramids on in Total Recall. Again, Schwarzenegger.
In Total Recall, that movie was just awesome. I remember watching it as a kid. It just blew my mind. And I've always had this real weird connection with Mars. And I think there's some pretty fascinating stuff out there. That's a whole other subject. But the pyramid that he goes into at the end and pushes that button, it's that Martian handprint. And then all of a sudden it creates an atmosphere and everybody can breathe air and everything's good. Well, if you've heard of Courtney Brown and the Farsight Institute,
yeah,
they Dick Algier and Daz Smith, two of the best remote viewers in the world. I've had an opportunity to talk to Dick a couple of times, and he's going to be back on the show with us again here at the Leak Project in a week. But they did this remote viewing project on a specific area that NASA had an amazing photograph of what looks like this giant pyramid, and then outside of the pyramid there's some type of liquid or steam or something coming out of it. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, is that pyramid that was portrayed back in the Total Recall movie? Because if you look at the picture, the high resolution photograph in black and white, it does look very similar to or just a giant pyramid. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, final thoughts on this is the idea that Phobos and Deimos, the moons of Mars. Now, as we're looking at Mars today, we're really seeing polar caps. We're seeing atmosphere. They now have that new rover on there. Andrew Bashago saying he went to Mars with Obama. By the way, if you've heard Andrew Bashago say that, he was on Stephen Colbert talking about going to Mars with Obama. I'm the reason that he remembered that. He told me. I actually have a document from Andrew Basiago saying that I will be the extraterrestrial ambassador when he's president this year. So, but it was me talking about, it was me talking about Obama being a clone of Akhenaten that sparked Andrew Basiago's memory of going to Mars with Obama. So that was all my fault. I find that really interesting. But get back to Deimos and Phobos, the two moons of Mars. They did not show up at all. Now, no, there is no descriptions of moons of Mars until 1877. The only time that moons of Mars were ever mentioned was in a book known as Gulliver's Travels. This was before the 1877. But by 1877, now, of course, Gulliver's Travels is all about a giant and a bunch of little people, right?
Interesting.
But after 1877, everyone saw moons on Mars. And we have been watching Mars for 100 plus years. And people were already seeing like, canals and all the things that they were reporting that they were seeing on Mars. But Phobos and Deimos, okay, they mean fear and panic. That is the name of the moons of Mars. And Phobos has always been of utmost importance to the space program, both Russian and American. They've sent over 6 probes to Phobos to try and get an understanding of it. Now, Phobos 2, the mission from the Russian Space Agency, went up to Phobos to get some closer imagery, and every rocket, every satellite that has gone to Phobos has mysteriously vanished. And what is her name? Marina Popovich, the head of the program, of the Phobos program, came forward all over the news to show a 14-mile long craft that was they got a picture of before they lost Phobos 2. Now, just recently, NASA sent another Phobos project up, and this one was called the Phobos. It's hard to keep all this stuff in my brain. But the latest Phobos program that they sent up, they announced, okay, so Buzz Aldrin went around. He was on UFC or WWE and Dancing with the Stars, talking about a monolith on the moon of Mars. Right?
Right. I remember that.
He's telling everyone that would listen. He said it was either extraterrestrials or God that put it there. Now, when the Phobos mission went up, this last one, Phobos Grunt is what it was called, they shut the satellite off. They announced to the public, and I always broadcast this stuff from NASA TV live on Freeman TV. So if it's happening, I'll put it on the front page. I'll embed it to the website so you can watch. So we watched the whole Phobos Grunt thing. We watched the bombing of the moon. All of these things shown live on my website. So they shut the entire satellite down, went into silent running like a submarine in wartime. And they announced that they would not be able to get photographs of the monolith because they had to shut down the cameras and everything, because their goal was to see inside of Phobos. Now, lo and behold, they found it to be hollow, or 2/3 hollow. And those moons are not meant to be there. They show up out of nowhere. They look like the Death Star, not as much as Iapetus, the moon of Saturn.
Right.
But they absolutely are a big mystery to the scientific and the space program. And every time they send one up there, they lose it. This one managed to get the photographs, the data they needed, only by going into silent running. And then, of course, we never got to see the monolith on Phobos, which NASA proudly announced.
The Star Wars trilogy, and you look at the Death Star, George Lucas, when he put that together, if he had that knowledge, like just embedded in his DNA, or if...
Yeah. There's definitely stuff that Lucas encoded in there. The concept of the Jedi that actually goes back to the serpent people of Egypt, the Jedi, which also relates into magic. But, the Egyptians, they said that they came from fish people and serpent people. And they're known as the oh, the eight, the Ogdoad, right? Whereas you have the nine, which was the group that they were channeling with Uri Geller, the Ennead, and then the Ogdoad are these eight beings that are serpent and fish beings. And this comes up constantly in my research. The amount of serpent, and it used to be the backdrop of my website that you could see the serpent people and the fish people. And I've covered this pretty deeply. I was the guy who was uncovering the merfolk, the fish people, when David Icke was uncovering the reptilians. But my merfolk research didn't receive quite as much attention. But there's far more history on the merfolk than there are on the reptilians. And you find these combinations from Alpha Draconis and Sirius. And of course, then you find all the connections to the secret societies and the ancient civilizations that venerated Alpha Draconis and most especially Sirius. And you'll, of course, now know why Sirius is so prominent in all of the corporate productions. But yeah, definitely. Without a doubt, this stuff all plays out. It is historically accurate. And anyone that wants to dig into it can. What happens is they rely on the incredulous nature of us and realize that we'll make up our own answers, or we'll just say, oh, that's ridiculous, and we won't look any further. And when I speak, all I give you is straightforward data. All I do is tell you exactly what everything I have said to you tonight has been a national or international headline. There's nothing here I've said that is off the charts or any way, shape, or form. It's just that you're not aware of it. And so then you're going to listen to me and go, well, this guy's just crazy. You're never going to go Google that they sent a Doritos commercial to Ursa Major using iSCAT, where the Norway spiral occurred, or that they sent The Day the Earth Stood Still to Alpha Centauri.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane.
Yeah, what a movie, right? You're going to send a movie to the closest inhabited star system to our own, Alpha Centauri. According to all research, it's inhabited, and it's going to be The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves saying that humanity is so horrible that we should just be eradicated by nanotechnology. Just send a big robot none of us can remember, Klaatu Varata Niktu, and destroy the planet. That's the movie you want to send to distant stars. And guess when it arrived in Alpha Centauri? December 21st, 2012.
Jeez.
It was simulcast from here in 2008. It took 4 years for it to reach Alpha Centauri. They were watching it December 21st, 2012. All right. That's the planet we live on. Nothing I'm saying is crazy.
What is crazy is this stuff can be researched and the documents are out there, and a lot of people, first of all, won't even care enough to look at the information, and if they do, they're gonna say, well, it's a conspiracy. It's on the internet. You can write anything on the internet, even if they're white papers, just anything that you can justify.
.gov.
Yeah. It's mind-blowing. But man, I got to tell you, really appreciate you coming on with this, Freeman. I wish that I could talk to you for another 24 hours, but just got so much information out there. I really appreciate your energy and what you bring to the table. Before we close out, is there some information or anything you'd like to share with our listeners? And also, please give us your website and your YouTube channel again for those that want to research you further.
Yeah, absolutely. Friendship is the key. They want us all isolated and separated. So get out there and talk to people. Don't be shy. This is your only chance on planet Earth. So don't mess it up. Get out there, talk to people, share information. Don't care if they're going to think you're crazy, or just become friends with people, because we're all going to need each other very soon. So that's one key mark I want to say. Realize that the universe is working in your favor if you follow the path of synchronicity and allow it. Don't overthink yourself into this puzzle. And if you want to know more and more, get over to freemantv.com. 10 years, I've put something new on that website every week. So 10 years of data there. I have an entire list of space war news that outlines all of this stuff. I have, numerous edited, well-produced videos, plus all the interviews, plus all the links and exclusive articles, all the lectures. I have not stopped. I have not had a day off in 10 years. I'm really kind of looking forward to taking a vacation here at some time. But get over to freemantv.com. Check everything out. Click everything because I put everything there. And so it's all safe. And just let it go. Just go wild because there's so much data there, so much knowledge and just amazing information. And get weird stuff. Operation Culture Creation, and start sharing that with your friends. You pick up these books, I guarantee you, I promise you, it will open a dialogue to so many of these topics. This book is on the ground floor. It was designed and written for people that know nothing. And it was also designed to be visually capturing so that your friends can't help but pick it up. So the latest one that we just published, it just came out this week, is called Hollywood Mind Control. So just check out weird stuff. Make sure to buy it from freemantv.com and not Amazon, because Amazon takes all our money. We put it on there because, well, you have to. But, if you buy it from us, more of the profits go to us. Otherwise, we get jack.
Okay.
So get over to freemantv.com. Just check it out.
Really appreciate it, Freeman. This has been great. Really hope you'll come back on again with us sometime.
Yeah, I look forward to it. There's plenty more.
Awesome. A very special thank you to our guest tonight. For all of you that had the opportunity to be here with us, if you enjoyed the show, follow us on YouTube, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord, for the most recent interviews, videos, and podcasts. Or you can check us out on the World Wide Web, www.leakproject.com. Would you like to be a guest on our show? Do you have information that the world needs to see and hear? Send us an email. Guestbookings@leakproject.com. Thank you, everybody. This is Rex Bear with Leak Project. Stay safe and be the change you want to see. Good night.